On January 8, 1894, Raymond Kolbe was born, the second son of a poor weaver, at Zdensko-Wola, Poland. In his infancy, Raymond seems to have been normally rebellious, but one day, after his mother had scolded him for some misbehavior, her words brought about a radical change in the child's behavior. Later, Raymond explained this change. "That night I asked the Mother of God what was to become of me. Then she appeared to me holding two crowns, one white, the other red. She asked if I was willing to accept either of these crowns. The white one meant that I should persevere in purity, and the red that I should become a martyr. I said that I would accept them both. Thus, early did the child believe and accept that he was destined for martyrdom. His belief in his dream colored all of his future actions." In 1910, he became a Franciscan, taking the name Maximilian. He studied at Rome and was ordained in 1919. He returned to Poland and taught church history in a seminary. He built a friary just west of Warsaw, which eventually housed 762 Franciscans, and printed 11 periodicals, one with a circulation of over 1 million, including a daily newspaper. In 1930, he went to Asia, where he founded friaries in Nagasaki and in India. In 1936, he was recalled to supervise the original friary near Warsaw. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, he knew that the friary would be seized, and sent most of the friars home. He was imprisoned briefly and then released, and returned to the friary, where he and other friars began to organize a shelter for 3,000 Polish refugees, among whom were 2,000 Jews. The friars shared everything they had with the refugees. They housed, fed, and clothed them, and brought all their machinery into use in their service. Inevitably, the community came under suspicion and was watched closely. Then in May 1941, the friary was closed down, and Maximilian and 4 companions were taken to the death camp Auschwitz, where they worked with other prisoners. Prisoners at Auschwitz were slowly and systematically starved, and their pitiful rations were barely enough to sustain a child. 1 cup of imitation coffee in the morning, and a weak soup and a half loaf of bread after work. When food was brought, everyone struggled to get his place to be sure of a portion. Father Maximilian Kolbe, however, stood aside in spite of the ravages of starvation, and frequently there would be none left for him. At other times he shared his meager ration of soup or bread with others. In the harshness of the slaughterhouse, Father Kolbe maintained the gentleness of Christ. At night he seldom would lie down to rest. He moved from bunk to bunk, saying, "I am a Catholic priest. Can I do anything for you?" A prisoner later recalled how he and several others often crawled across the floor at night to be near the bed of Father Kolbe, to make their confessions and ask for consolation. Father Kolbe pleaded with his fellow prisoners to forgive their persecutors and to overcome evil with good. When he was beaten by the guards, he never cried out. Instead, he prayed for his tormentors. In order to discourage escapes, Auschwitz had a rule that if a man escaped, 10 men would be killed in retaliation. In July 1941, a man from Kolbe's bunker escaped. "The fugitive has not been found," Commandant Karl Fritsch screamed. "You will all pay for this. 10 of you will be locked in the starvation bunker without food or water until you die." The prisoners trembled in terror. A few days in this bunker without food and water, and a man's intestines dried up and his brains turned to fire. The 10 were selected, including Francisek Gajowniczek, imprisoned for helping the Polish resistance. He couldn't help but cry of anguish. "My poor wife," he sobbed. "My poor children, what will they do?" When he uttered this cry of dismay, Maximilian stepped silently forward, took off his cap, and stood before the commandant and said, "I am a Catholic priest. Let me take his place. I am old. He has a wife and children." Astounded, the icy-faced Nazi commandant asked, "What does this Polish pig want?" Father Kolbe pointed with his hand to the condemned Francisek Gajowniczek and repeated, "I am a Catholic priest from Poland. I would like to take his place, because he has a wife and children." Observers believed in horror that the commandant would be angered and would refuse the request, or would order the death of both men. The commandant remained silent for a moment. What his thoughts were on being confronted by this brave priest, we have no idea. Amazingly, however, he acceded to the request. Apparently the Nazis had more use for a young worker than for an old one, and was happy to make the exchange. Francisek Gajowniczek was returned to the ranks, and the priest took his place. Father Kolbe was thrown down the stairs of Building 13, along with the other victims, and simply left there to starve. Hunger and thirst soon gnawed at the men. Some drank their own urine, others licked moisture on the dank walls. Maximilian Kolbe encouraged the others with prayers, psalms, and meditations on the Passion of Christ. After 2 weeks, only 4 were alive. The cell was needed for more victims, and the camp executioner, a common criminal called Bach, came in and injected a lethal dose of carbolic acid into the left arm of each of the 4 dying men. Kolbe was the only one still fully conscious, and with a prayer on his lips, the last prisoner raised his arm for the executioner. His wait was over. So it was that Father Maximilian Kolbe was executed on August 14th, 1941, at the age of 47 years, a martyr of charity. Father Kolbe's body was removed to the crematorium, and without dignity or ceremony was disposed of, like hundreds of thousands who had gone before him, and hundreds of thousands more who would follow. The heroism of Father Kolbe went echoing through Auschwitz. In that desert of hatred, he had shown love. A survivor, Joseph Stimler, later recalled, "In the midst of a brutalization of thought, feeling, and words, such as had never before been known, man indeed became a ravening wolf in his relations with other men. And into this state of affairs came the heroic self-sacrifice of Father Kolbe." Another survivor, Jerzy Bilecki, declared that Father Kolbe's death was a shock filled with hope, bringing new life and strength. It was like a powerful shaft of light into the darkness of the camp. The cell where Father Kolbe died is now a shrine. Maximilian Kolbe was beatified as confessor by Paul VI in 1970 and canonized as martyr by Pope John Paul II in 1981. Francisek Gajowniczek, the man Father Kolbe saved, died on March 13, 1995 at Barracks in Poland, 95 years old and 53 years after Kolbe saved his life. Every year on August 14th, he went back to Auschwitz. He spent the next 5 decades paying homage to Father Kolbe, honoring the man who died on his behalf.